A young woman gasps awake. Her eyes dart across a blood-soaked room. She is surrounded by the mutilated bodies of her close friends, $1 billion in scattered cash, and the absolute certainty of a lifelong prison sentence. Her predicament is the result of a total hijacking. Up until a few seconds ago, she was a prisoner inside her own mind, forced to watch helplessly as her body carried out a massacre. This is the bleak setup of the 2026 box office hit, Obsession. The catalyst for this carnage is a simple, desperate romantic wish, granted with ruthless literalness. The film's horror rests in the terrifying reality of stolen consent, the outcome of one person demanding absolute, non-consensual devotion from another. To understand how the bloodbath happened, we have to look at the architect of the nightmare, Bear. He is a textbook nice guy, paralyzed by his own insecurity. He wants his childhood friend to love him, but he is too terrified of rejection to actually ask her how she feels, so he bypasses the risk entirely. Bear buys a supernatural novelty toy called a one-wish willow, snaps the branch, and asks the object to make her love him more than anyone in the world. The target of this wish is Nikki. Before the curse takes hold, she is fiercely independent, spontaneous, and actively planning a future that has absolutely nothing to do with Bear. Bear chooses magic over the vulnerability of a real conversation. By skipping over Nikki's right to choose, he erases her free will, building the perfect trap for a psychological nightmare. At first, the wish operates exactly as Bear intended. Nikki suddenly showers him with intense, unyielding affection, and because he is finally getting the validation he craved, he selfishly chooses to enjoy the fantasy, ignoring her rapidly deteriorating mental state. This diagram illustrates the fatal syntax of Bear's wish. By demanding that she love him more than anyone, the curse establishes a strictly mathematical hierarchy. Bear sits at the center. If his needs are paramount, then every other node, her friends, her pets, her own personal safety, is a threat to her devotion. This logic twists standard affection into grotesque obsession. To prove her dedication, Nikki's cursed body begins committing atrocities disguised as care, like preparing a sandwich for Bear out of the remains of his own dead cat. The violence eventually targets their mutual friend, Sarah. Because Sarah represents a natural, uncursed connection to Bear, the possessed Nikki brutally crushes her head against a steering wheel. The willow weaponizes Bear's romantic fantasy into an inescapable prison of isolation and extreme violence. The true cruelty lies beneath the bloodshed. Nikki's consciousness is entirely awake, trapped behind a veil in her own mind, screaming in horror as she watches her body perform these atrocities. Bear discovers this when he calls the magic item's bureaucratic customer service line. Through the phone, he can literally hear the real Nikki wailing in agony from the purgatory where the curse has locked her. Faced with the reality of her suffering, Bear still does not immediately break the spell. He stalls. He hides evidence. He prioritizes his own unearned validation over her freedom. Eventually, Bear begs their friend Ian to use a second willow branch to reverse the curse. But Ian selfishly wishes for $1 billion instead. A massive mountain of physical cash violently crashes through the ceiling, confirming the magic is real, but sealing Nikki's fate. By willfully ignoring Nikki's torture, Bear transitions from a clumsy romantic into an active perpetrator of profound emotional violence. Which brings us back to the present. Ian is dead, Sarah's body is hidden, and Bear is barricaded inside a bathroom, realizing the situation is beyond repair. The customer service line revealed a brutal safeguard. The spell only breaks if the wisher or the victim dies. Cornered by the threat of prison and his own crushing guilt, Bear swallows a lethal dose of painkillers. But before the overdose takes effect, Nikki finds another willow branch. Dominated by the curse, she wishes that Bear loved her equally. Bear steps out of the bathroom under a reciprocal spell, embracing her with manufactured devotion right before he collapses. Bear's death serves as the ultimate evasion of accountability. By dying, he successfully escapes a lifetime of guilt and a certain prison sentence. The film originally ended with a tidier resolution. The first cut featured a Romeo and Juliet ending, where Nikki takes her own life the moment Bear's death breaks the spell. But the director chose to scrap the double suicide. He realized that forcing Nikki to survive the ordeal was infinitely more disturbing. Bear's death returns Nikki to her own body at the worst possible moment. She wakes to a destroyed life, inheriting the trauma of her captivity, the grief for her friends, and the task of explaining a room full of corpses to the police. Obsession reveals that forcing a connection constitutes total destruction. The curse is broken, but the damage is permanent. For the victim left standing in the ruins, surviving the nightmare is far more terrifying than dying in it.